She was 21 years old and completely bankrupt. No family, no safety net, no second chances. Just $327 in a checking account that had once held dreams and a decision that made absolutely no sense to anyone who knew her story. Vera Callahan stood in the parking lot of a county records office in rural Pennsylvania, staring at a printout that might as well have been a suicide note. The paper trembled in her hands, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper. The kind of tremor that comes when you realize you're about to do something irreversible. The listing was simple. Almost insultingly simple. Former limestone quarry. 43 acres. Flooded. Abandoned since 1974. Classified as environmental liability. Starting bid $300. $300 for 43 acres of American soil. Most people would have seen it for what it was. A trap. A toxic waste site that would drain whatever resources you threw at it and give nothing back except legal headaches and slow poison. But Vera wasn't most people anymore. 6 months ago, she'd been a college sophomore with a partial scholarship, a work-study job at the campus library, and a carefully maintained 3.7 GPA. She'd had friends, plans, a future that looked modest but stable. Then the economy buckled. Not the kind that makes headlines, the kind that happens quietly in the margins to people nobody writes about. The scholarship dried up mid-semester. The library cut positions. The landlord raised rent by 40% because he could. Vera had watched her world compress into an impossible equation. Stay in school without funding or leave with nothing to show for 2 years of work. She'd chosen to leave. The jobs that followed lasted weeks, then days. The apartment became unaffordable. Her roommates moved back to families who had homes to return to. Vera's mother had died 3 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal. There was no home to return to. No family to call. Just $327 and a used Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. She'd been sleeping in that Civic for 2 weeks when she found the listing. She'd been parked outside a public library in a town called Millbrook, using their Wi-Fi to search for any job that didn't require an address she didn't have. The auction site had been open in another tab, clicked days earlier in dark humor. What does rock bottom cost these days? The Quarry listing loaded slowly. Dark water, rusted fence, warning signs, and that price, $300. She'd laughed, a sharp, unhinged sound that made a passing woman stare. But then Vera stopped laughing, because something about that image triggered a memory, faint, distant. Her mother, years ago, sitting at their kitchen table with an old photograph. Her expression unreadable. What's that, Mom? Her mother had startled, quickly tucking the photograph away. Nothing, honey. Just old family stuff. The photograph had shown water. Dark water surrounded by stone. Vera had been 8. She'd forgotten until now. She stared at the quarry listing, then checked county records, property history, previous owners. And there, buried in documents from 1974, she saw it. Callahan, her mother's maiden name. The connection hit like a physical blow. This quarry, this abandoned pit, had been connected to her family, then lost, sold off, forgotten, until now. She submitted a bid. $300. Every dollar except the $27 for gas. 2 days later, confirmation arrived. The property was hers. The quarry was a 2-hour drive from Millbrook. Vera followed GPS down increasingly narrow roads, watching civilization thin with each mile. Suburban developments gave way to scattered farms, then dense forest broken only by occasional rusted mailboxes. The final road was barely paved, winding through trees that leaned in from both sides. No lights, no houses, just green darkness and gravel crunching under tires. Then the trees opened. She pulled over slowly and stared. The quarry stretched before her like a wound in the earth. 43 acres of still black water, surrounded by limestone walls, rising 30 feet. The surface was motionless, not a ripple, just absolute light-absorbing darkness. It looked like something that swallowed things whole and never gave them back. The silence was total when she cut the engine. No birds, no wind, just pressing, suffocating quiet. What had she done? This wasn't an investment. It was a grave. A place where things went to die and be forgotten. And she'd bought it with her last $300. Slowly, she opened the door. The air outside was different. Cooler than it should have been for late autumn. And still, unnaturally still. She walked to the water's edge. Rusted chain-link fence lined the rim, sagging in places, collapsed in others. Warning signs hung at intervals. Danger. No trespassing. Toxic water. Keep out. The water was 10 feet below the rim here, completely opaque. She couldn't see beneath the surface at all. It looked solid like polished black stone. She picked up a rock and tossed it in. The splash echoed loudly. Ripples spread outward, then faded. Within seconds, the surface was glass smooth again, like nothing had disturbed it. She was turning back to her car when she heard footsteps. Vera spun around, heart hammering. An old man stood 20 feet away watching her. Tall, or had been before age, bent his spine forward. Mid-70s with steel gray hair and a face weathered by decades outdoors. Canvas work pants and faded denim jacket. But his eyes were sharp, very sharp. You bought this place? Not a question. His voice was rough like gravel. Vera straightened. Yes, I did. He nodded, slowly, gaze moving past her to the water. He stared at it, expression unreadable. Name's Silas Brennan, he said finally. I live about a mile down the road. Been here since 1968. Vera Callahan. Something flickered across his face when she said her last name. Recognition and sadness. Callahan, he repeated quietly. Silence then. You know what this place is? A quarry. Limestone. Shut down in 1974. You know why? Vera hesitated. County records had been vague. Environmental violations, unsafe conditions, bureaucratic language. Not exactly. Silas nodded as if expecting this. He walked closer, moving carefully over uneven ground. When he reached the fence, he stopped. I was the foreman here, he said. In '74, 24 years old. Thought I had the world figured out. He paused, jaw working. This was a good operation. Clean, profitable. The stone we pulled out built half the buildings in 3 counties. Good limestone. Pure. What happened? His hands gripped the rusted fence. Something changed. Equipment breaking down in ways that didn't make sense. Supplies missing. Then the accidents. What kind of accidents? The kind that kill people. The words hung between them. 2 men died here. Good men. One in a rock collapse the engineers said shouldn't have been possible. The other in machinery that had been certified safe the week before. I'm sorry. Wasn't your fault. His voice was flat, but it wasn't an accident either. Someone wanted this place shut down. Wanted it bad enough to kill for it. Vera's breath caught. You're saying someone murdered those workers. I'm saying the investigation was buried faster than those men were. Officials who couldn't be bought got transferred. People who asked questions stopped asking real quick. He looked back at the water. The owner at the time fought it for a while, tried to prove sabotage, but the pressure kept building. Legal troubles, financial troubles, troubles with licenses that had always been fine before. What was his name? Though part of her already knew. Jonah Callahan. The name hit like a punch. Her grandfather. Her mother's father. A man she'd never met. He finally gave up. Silas continued. Sold the land for almost nothing to settle debts they'd manufactured. Moved away. I heard he died about 10 years later. Heart attack, they said. But I think it was a broken heart. Silas faced her, fully expression grave. Listen carefully, Vera Callahan. Whatever you're thinking of doing here, don't. This place took from your family once already. It'll take from you too. I don't have anything left for it to take. He studied her face, seeing something that made him pause. Maybe not, he said quietly. But there are worse things than being broke. He started walking away, then stopped. What's under that water was meant to stay buried. There are people who went to great lengths to make sure of that. People with long memories and deep pockets. You start digging, they'll notice. Who? But Silas just shook his head. Get yourself a meal and a warm bed somewhere. Sell this land and move on. That's my advice. I can't sell it. I spent everything buying it. His expression softened slightly, shifting to something almost like pity. Then I'm real sorry. Because this place doesn't let go easy. He walked into the gathering dusk, leaving Vera alone with dark water and questions heavier than silence. That night, Vera slept in her car at the quarry's edge. She'd parked near trees, offering shelter from wind that picked up after sunset. Temperature dropped fast, and she huddled in her sleeping bag, watching breath fog in dying phone light. Silas's warning echoed. People who went to great lengths. People with long memories. People who killed. She should be terrified. But instead, Vera felt something else. Something building since she'd seen her family name in those records. Anger. Her grandfather had built something here. Something good. And it had been stolen. Destroyed deliberately. He died carrying that loss, never able to fight back. And her mother, who'd never talked about her father, except in briefest terms, who'd kept that photograph hidden like secret shame. She'd carried that loss too. Now it passed to Vera. The last Callahan. The end of a line broken before she was born. She could walk away. Find some buyer for toxic land. Use that money for a bus ticket somewhere else and start over with nothing. Or she could stay. She could look into that dark water and try to understand what had been worth killing for. What had been worth burying for 50 years. Vera pulled the sleeping bag tighter and stared at the quarry. The water was invisible in darkness, but she could feel it there. Waiting. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "Not yet." Morning came cold and gray. Vera woke with her back-aching breath visible in the frigid car. She dreamed of dark water and voices calling from beneath the surface, words she couldn't make out. She sat up slowly, wiping condensation from windows. The quarry stretched before her, looking different in daylight, but no less ominous. Water still black, still motionless. But now she could see details. The texture of limestone walls carved by decades of extraction. Rusted remains of what might have been loading platforms. The way fence line had been reinforced in places as if to keep something in, rather than people out. She climbed out, muscles protesting. She had a protein bar and half a bottle of water left. After that, she'd need to figure out food, and money, and everything else. But first, she needed to understand what she was dealing with. She spent the morning walking the perimeter. 43 acres was larger than it seemed. Property extended back into dense forest on one side, following a ridgeline with views of surrounding valley. Another side bordered an old access road long overgrown. Everywhere she looked were traces of operations that once thrived here. Concrete foundations where buildings stood. Rusted machinery parts half buried in soil. Cable remnants hanging from weathered posts. This hadn't been small time. This had been serious, professional, well-equipped, which made its sudden abandonment stranger. By early afternoon, she found herself back at the water's edge. She'd avoided it all morning, circling, studying everything except what mattered most. Now she stood at the rim and looked down. In daylight, the surface caught occasional sunlight. Glints, brief flashes disappearing as quickly as they appeared. But opacity remained total. Impossible to guess depth. 10 feet, 50, 100, the only way to know would be to go down there. The thought sent fear spiking through her chest. She wasn't a diver. She'd been swimming exactly twice, both times at a community pool. The idea of descending into lightless water, not knowing what was below, not knowing if she'd get back up. But what choice did she have? If there was anything down there, anything explaining what her grandfather tried to protect, anything justifying what was done to him, it was under that water. And she was the only person who could find it. Vera looked at the sky. Early November. Water would be cold. Dangerously cold. She'd need equipment. Wetsuit at minimum. Oxygen tanks. Lights. Safety gear. She checked her bank account. $27. The despair washing over her was familiar. That crushing weight of impossible math of needs vastly exceeding means of doors closing before you reach them. But beneath despair, something else stirred. The same stubbornness keeping her going through 6 months of cascading failures. The same refusal to disappear that made her spend last money on this impossible gamble. $27 wouldn't buy professional diving equipment, but it might buy something, enough to at least look. She got back in her car and drove to the nearest town. The sporting goods store in Millbrook was having clearance. End of season, everything must go. Vera walked aisles with focused intensity, calculating prices, weighing options. Used wetsuit size, small damage zipper. Repaired with duct tape, $14. Basic snorkel mask with cracked seal the clerk assured wouldn't leak if careful, $6. That left $7. Vera stood in checkout holding her purchases, trying not to think how insane this was. This wasn't diving equipment. This was suicide gear. Wetsuit wouldn't keep her warm in November water for more than minutes. Mask would probably leak. She had no oxygen tank, no backup, no safety line. No plan except jump in and see what happened. The rational part of her brain screamed. This was how people died. Young and stupid and alone, taking risks. Making no sense, leaving nothing behind. Except mystery no one would solve. But the rational part had been wrong about a lot lately. She paid and walked out. Back at the quarry, she sat in her car, staring at the wetsuit. Sun was sinking toward horizon. If she was doing this, it needed to be now. In another hour, there wouldn't be enough light. She changed into the wetsuit in the back seat, struggling with damaged zipper. Neoprene was stiff. Smelled like mildew, but fit well enough. Mask went on easier, cracked seal pressing against her face. Then she stood at water's edge looking down. Fear was real now. Physical. Heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. Every survival instinct screamed at her to step back, to stop, to not do this. She thought about her mother. About sadness always lingering in her eyes when she thought no one looked. About the photograph kept hidden, unable to throw away but unwilling to display. About all the things buried. Nothing down there can be worse than staying stuck up here, Vera whispered. Then she jumped. The cold hit like a hammer. Not just cold. Violent, invasive cold tearing through wetsuit, through skin, straight into bones. Vera's lungs seized, body going rigid with shock. She forced herself to breathe. Slow. Controlled. Don't panic. Water closed over her head, and everything went dark. Even with eyes open behind the mask, she could see nothing. Blackness was absolute. She might as well be suspended in ink. Vera kicked downward, forcing herself deeper. 5 feet. 10. 15. Pressure built in her ears, painful, disorienting. Lungs already starting to burn. Without oxygen tanks, she had maybe 90 seconds before needing to surface. She reached out, feeling blindly. Her hands touched nothing but cold water. Keep going. There has to be something. 20 feet. 25. Cold was becoming unbearable, seeping into her core. Muscles starting to go numb. Then her fingers brushed something solid. Vera's heart leaped. She felt along the surface. Metal. Rusted but intact. It felt like a beam angling downward into deeper darkness. She followed it down. 30 feet. 35. Lungs screaming now. She needed to surface. Soon. But the beam led to something larger. A structure. Twisted metal framework that felt deliberate, constructed. Not natural limestone. Wreckage. Her oxygen-starved brain tried making sense of shapes her hands touched. Machinery. Equipment. Things that had fallen or been dumped and left to rust. But the arrangement felt wrong. Not random. Almost organized. Like it had been placed deliberately. Lungs finally overrode her determination. Vera kicked hard, pushing towards surface. Up, up. Darkness seemed endless. Had she gone deeper than thought? Panic clawed at mind's edges. Which way was up? Then she saw it. Faint lightning of black above. Vera swam toward it with everything she had. She broke surface, gasping, dragging air like she'd been drowning. Which she almost had been. Her whole body shook from cold and adrenaline and aftermath of pure terror. She swam clumsily to edge and hauled herself out, collapsing on limestone rim. For several minutes she just lay there, breathing, trembling alive. That had been stupid. Recklessly, dangerously stupid. She could have died down there. Could have gotten disoriented and swam down instead of up. Could have passed out from oxygen lack and sunk like a stone. And for what? Some rusted metal in dark. But as breathing slowed and shaking subsided, Vera found herself thinking about what she'd felt down there. The organized nature of it. The deliberate placement. Someone had put those things down there, and not randomly. She needed to go back. But next time she needed to be able to see. Over the next 3 days, Vera became familiar with every pawn shop and surplus outlet within 30 miles. She sold everything with any value. Laptop 3 years old, but functional $40. Phone keeping only the ancient flip phone $70. Silver necklace her mother had given her for her 16th birthday, the last thing she wanted to part with, $35. With the money, she bought what she needed. Better wetsuit, professionally patched. Basic oxygen tank, small and old, but certified functional. High-powered underwater flashlight. Length of rope for safety line. Still wasn't professional equipment, but massive improvement over first attempt. She also bought a used trailer, the rusted shell of what had been a camping trailer, parked behind a farm lot with "Free, haul it away" sign. No electricity, no water, roof leaked in 3 places, but it had 4 walls and a door that locked. Vera parked it at Quarry's edge and moved in. She now officially lived in a metal box next to toxic water on land everyone said was worthless. She'd never felt more at home. On the 4th day, she was ready to try again. This time, Vera took her time with preparation. She secured one rope end to a sturdy fence post at water's edge, running the other through a carabiner on her weight belt. She tested oxygen regulator 3 times, making sure flow was steady. Checked flashlight batteries twice. Then she stood at edge and looked down into black water. Fear was still there, but quieter now, familiar. She put regulator in mouth, clicked on flashlight, and stepped off edge. The descent was completely different this time. Light cut through darkness like a blade, revealing what black water had hidden. Limestone walls extending down, carved with marks of decades-old drilling. Water itself clouded with fine sediment swirling in light beam and below the structures. Vera swam down slowly, following rope. 20 feet. 30. The beam framework she'd touched before came into view, and now she could see what it was. Remains of an industrial platform. Collapsed, twisted, but clearly man-made. Cables hung from it like dead vines. She swam closer, running light along wreckage. There were tools down here. Heavy equipment partially buried in silt. A crane toppled onto its side. This wasn't just debris. This was a disaster site, frozen in time, preserved by cold water. Men had died here. Silas said so. Were their bodies still down here somewhere, trapped in wreckage? She forced herself to keep moving. Rope played out behind as she swam deeper. 40 feet. 50. Limestone walls began changing character here. Less carved, more natural, as if quarry operation had reached limits of what they'd been extracting and stopped. But wreckage continued. More platforms, more equipment, all collapsed or overturned, almost like something had swept through here. A wave or explosion knocking everything down. Vera paused, hovering in waterlight, playing across debris field. Then the beam caught something different. A shape too regular to be natural. Too intact to be wreckage. She swam toward it, pulse quickening. It was a chest. Massive. Iron or steel coated in thick corrosion but still holding form. Roughly 6 feet long and 3 wide. Industrial strength, and it was chained to the quarry floor. Vera circled it slowly, mind racing. Heavy chains, rusted but intact, ran from reinforced corners to bolts driven deep into limestone bedrock. This wasn't storage. This was containment. Someone had wanted to make absolutely certain this chest stayed exactly where it was. She swam closer, running gloved hand along surface. Decades of accumulated silt came away in clouds, revealing more details. Riveted construction. heavy-duty lock still sealed, and on one corner, barely visible beneath corrosion, something etched into metal. Vera brushed away more silt. Heart pounding. It was a symbol, a crest. Two interlocking C-shapes surrounding what might have been a quarry hammer. She'd seen this before, in that half-glimpsed photograph her mother kept hidden, the Callahan family crest. Vera's breath caught, fogging her mask. This chest belonged to her family. Her grandfather had put it here, had chained it to bedrock, had sealed it, and left it. Why? What could be inside worth this level of protection? Worth chaining down like you were preventing it from surfacing? She reached out, fingers touching cold metal. And as she did, something changed. A vibration. Faint but distinct, running through water. Then bubbles. A stream of them rising from beneath the chest. Vera's eyes widened behind her mask. Gas. Trapped beneath the chest for decades. And her touch had disturbed whatever seal held it. The stream became a column. Then an eruption. Suddenly, water around her was churning, filled with released gas and exploding silt. Visibility dropped to zero. Vera's light showed nothing but brown chaos. She grabbed for her safety rope, but current from gas release yanked her sideways. Her regulator crackled, oxygen flow disrupting as sediment clogged intake. Panic hit hard and fast. Vera kicked, trying to orient herself. Which way was up? Churning water had completely disoriented her. Rope was somewhere to her left, but she'd lost track of which direction left even was. Her regulator sputtered, then cut out completely. Panic became terror. She needed air. Needed it now. Vera clawed through murky water lungs already burning. Something brushed past. The rope. She grabbed for it, but it was just loose cable from wreckage. Her vision was starting to narrow. Not from murky water, from oxygen lack. She was going to die down here, alone in dark, just like she'd almost died in her car on the street. Just like she'd been slowly dying for 6 months. No. The word formed in her oxygen-starved mind with absolute clarity. No. She forced herself to stop thrashing. To think. Bubbles were rising, which meant they were going up. Vera followed them. She swam through cloud, ignoring burning in chest spots appearing in vision. Just swim. Just keep swimming. And then, impossibly, water began to lighten, from black to dark gray, from dark gray to murky brown, to light. Vera burst through surface with a sound somewhere between gasp and sob. Air flooded lungs, beautiful, cold, life-giving air. She grabbed Quarry rime edge, hauling herself up with shaking arms. Her whole body trembled violently, from cold, from oxygen deprivation, from purest terror she'd ever experienced. She'd almost died. Again. But this time she'd found something. Vera lay on limestone, staring up at gray November sky, and started laughing. a harsh, slightly unhinged sound echoing across empty quarry. She'd found it. The thing her grandfather buried. The thing someone killed to keep hidden. And she was going to bring it up. Whatever it took. Whatever it cost. 2 days later, Vera stood at Quarry's edge with new equipment. Better rope rated for industrial use. Proper climbing harness. Hand crank winch she'd found at farm auction for $12. And the determination of someone with absolutely nothing left to lose. The dive down was easier this time. She knew the route. Knew where wreckage was. Knew where to find the chest. Gas release had settled. Water was clearer than it had been, though still murky. Her light showed the chest exactly where she'd left it, still chained to bedrock. Vera circled it slowly, studying chains. They were anchored at 4 points each, bolted into limestone. Bolts were rusted but held firm. Pulling them out would be impossible. But chains themselves, after 50 years underwater, had weakened. Vera pulled hacksaw from equipment belt. It was slow, exhausting work. Rust-weakened metal resisted, then gave way strand by strand. Her arms burned with effort. Oxygen supply ticked down. But finally, first chain parted, then second, third. Fourth and final chain was hardest. It had been reinforced, wrapped double. Vera sawed until her arms felt like they'd fall off. Then it snapped. The chest shifted slightly, freed from anchors, lighter than she'd expected, almost like it wanted to rise. Vera attached her rope to heavy iron handles on both ends, securing with climbing knots she'd learned from YouTube videos on library Wi-Fi. Then she gave 3 sharp tugs on safety line. Above hand crank winch began to turn. Chest rose slowly at first, then faster. Vera swam alongside, guiding it past obstacles, heart pounding with mixture of triumph and trepidation. They were going to make it. She was going to bring up whatever her grandfather hidden. Then chest jerked to stop. Vera looked down and felt stomach drop. One of the chains. It had caught on wreckage below, wrapped around collapsed beam. Chest hung suspended rope, straining. Above winch continued pulling, not knowing it met resistance. Vera swam down to free it, reaching for tangled chain. Her fingers closed around rusted metal. And wreckage shifted. The entire collapsed platform structure, destabilized by chest's removal, began collapsing further. Metal beams groaned. Cables snapped. Vera kicked backward as massive section of framework tumbled past, missing her by inches. Chest swung wildly on rope, smashing into limestone wall. Impact sent shockwave through water. Then the quarry itself seemed to respond. A deep subsonic rumble, felt more than heard, coming from somewhere far below. Vera froze, heart hammering. What was that? Rumble came again, louder. Then silt began to rise, not in clouds, in a solid wall, as if something beneath quarry floor was releasing pressure, forcing everything upward. Vera didn't wait to see what came next. She grabbed safety rope and pulled herself up hand over hand as fast as her arms would move. Below, silt wall rose like a living thing, obscuring everything. Chest, wreckage, quarry bottom. Vera broke surface, gasping. She scrambled onto rim and kept pulling, hauling in rope with desperate strength. Chest emerged from brown water like breaching whale, dark iron, streaming with decades of quarry water, ancient and impossibly heavy, and unmistakably real. Vera pulled it onto limestone rim, then collapsed beside it, chest heaving, arms shaking. She'd done it. Behind her, quarry water continued churning. Whatever she disturbed down there was still reacting, releasing trapped gases and sediment from deep chambers. Surface roiled with activity for first time in 50 years. Like something that had been asleep was finally waking up. Vera stared at the chest. Up close, its construction was even more impressive. Military-grade hardware. Joints designed waterproof even at depth. Locking mechanism engineered to survive anything. And on corner, now clearly visible with silt, washed away the Callahan crest. Her family had sealed something in here. Something important enough to hide at quarry bottom. Something worth chaining to bedrock to make sure it never surfaced accidentally. Something worth killing to keep buried. Vera reached for lock. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion and cold and anticipation. Lock was rusted but intact. She'd need tools to break it. Serious tools. But first, she needed to know. She was right about what this was. She ran fingers along seal where lid met body of chest. Still tight after all these years. Whatever was inside had been protected from water. Then she noticed something else. Scratched into metal near lock, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Letters. Carved roughly like someone had done it quickly. J.C. Jonah Callahan. Her grandfather's initials. He'd marked this. Left evidence it was his. That it belonged to family. That someday someone might find it and understand. Vera sat back, looking at chest with new eyes. This wasn't just hidden object. It was a message. Left by a man forced to abandon everything he'd built, driven away by threats and violence and bureaucratic warfare. A message that had waited 50 years for right person to receive it. For family to come back and finish what he'd started. Vera looked up at Quarry, at dark water still churning from disturbance below. At rusted fence and warning signs. At wilderness reclaiming what had once been industrial site. "I'm here, Grandpa," she whispered. "I found it, and I'm not letting it go." November wind picked up rattling chain-link fence. In distance, she heard a crow's call. First bird she'd heard since arriving at this place. Like silence was finally breaking. Vera stood, muscles protesting, and looked around for something to use on lock. She had a crowbar in her car. And patience. And more stubbornness than good sense. She was going to open this chest. She was going to see what her grandfather hidden. And then, somehow, she was going to make it mean something. Because if she'd learned anything in past 6 months, it was this: when you have nothing left, you fight with what remains. And what remained was this. This land. This mystery. this inheritance of locked iron and buried truth. It would have to be enough. It would have to be everything. The crowbar was rusted, but it still had weight. Vera wedged it under the lock mechanism and pulled with everything she had. Metal groaned but didn't give. She tried again. And again. Her arms were already exhausted from pulling the chest up, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was this close. On the fourth attempt, something cracked. Not the lock itself, but corroded metal around it. The entire hasp tore free with a screech of protesting iron. The lid shifted. Vera dropped the crowbar and grabbed chest edges with both hands. It was heavy. Incredibly heavy. But adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she had. The lid opened with a sound like stone grinding on stone. And Vera saw what her grandfather had hidden. No gold, no jewels, no treasure chest cliché, just paper. Stacks of it wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow kept water out for 5 decades. Documents, blueprints, letters, all carefully preserved as if someone knew they might need to survive a very long time. Vera's first reaction was crushing disappointment. After everything, after nearly dying twice, this was what she'd found. Paper. But something made her look closer. She pulled out the first bundle. Oilcloth crackled as she unwrapped it, brittle with age, but intact. Inside were architectural drawings, large sheets hand-drafted with precision speaking of professional engineering. The title at top read, Callahan Quarry Restoration Project, Phase 1. Vera's breath caught. These weren't just documents. These were plans. Detailed, comprehensive plans for something her grandfather had been building. She spread drawings on ground weighing corners with rocks. November wind tried tearing them from her hands, but she held tight. Blueprints showed the quarry as it was meant to be. Not a toxic pit, not abandoned waste site, but a functioning water purification system. Drawings detailed everything. Natural limestone formations, underground water channels, how the quarry could be used as massive natural filtration basin cleaning water through layers of mineral-rich stone. This wasn't a mining operation at all, or rather it had been. But Jonah Callahan had seen something more, a second life for the quarry, a purpose beyond extraction. Vera pulled out more documents, engineering calculations, geological surveys, water quality reports from 1973 showing crystalline purity in deep chambers. And then she found the letters. They were in separate oilcloth bundle, tied with string that disintegrated when touched. Top letter was addressed to someone named William Brennan. Brennan, like Silas. Vera's hands trembled as she unfolded it. Paper was yellowed, but ink remained dark and legible. Handwriting was firm, confident. Writing of someone who believed in what they were doing. William, the opposition is growing stronger. They've made another offer through legal channels disguised as environmental concern. I've refused. But pressure is becoming difficult to ignore. The accidents were no accidents. We both know that. What they want is water rights, not stone. If they can prove the quarry is contaminated, they can seize land under hazardous site regulations and pay a fraction of its value. Then they'll have access to the aquifer beneath. Everything we've built here, everything we've proven possible will be buried. I need you to understand something. If I have to stop this project, if they force me to abandon it, I won't let the work disappear. I'll hide everything. Plans, research, proof of what this system can do. And someday when the right person finds it, when someone comes who can't be bought or threatened away, they'll finish what we started. Land has a way of calling its own back. I have to believe that. Jonah. Vera read the letter 3 times, then put it down carefully and looked out at Quarry. Dark water, abandoned equipment, warning signs and rusted fence. This place wasn't toxic. It never had been. It had been sabotaged, deliberately poisoned to justify shutting it down, to drive her grandfather away, to bury a restoration project that would have proven the aquifer beneath was one of purest water sources in Pennsylvania. And someone had been willing to kill to make that happen. Vera felt rage building in chest. Pure, clean rage like she'd never felt before. Her grandfather had been destroyed for trying to do something good, for trying to prove damaged land could be healed. That industry didn't have to mean permanent destruction. And 50 years later, nothing had changed. Land was still classified hazardous, still abandoned, still slowly leaching whatever real contamination had been introduced into surrounding water table. A waste, a crime, a buried promise never fulfilled. Until now. Vera went through rest of documents with systematic intensity. More blueprints, more letters. A journal Jonah kept documenting every step of restoration process. And tucked at very bottom of chest, a sealed envelope with 2 words written outside. To family. Vera's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was single sheet of paper. Handwriting was shakier than other letters, written later perhaps, or under stress. If you're reading this, then land has found its way back to you. I don't know how. I don't know when. But I knew it would. Callahans don't give up. We don't walk away. Your mother understood that, even if she was too young to do anything when I had to leave. I'm writing this the day before I sign papers, day before I lose everything I built here. They won, not because they were right, but because they had more money and fewer scruples. But they didn't win completely. Because I'm leaving this for you. All proof, all plans, all evidence of what was really happening here. This land was never cursed. It was never toxic. It was interrupted. What lies beneath is not something to fear. It's something to restore. Finish it. Please, don't let them bury this forever. Land remembers, water remembers, and now you know truth. Make it matter. Your grandfather, Jonah Callahan. Vera sat back, letter still in hands, and felt tears burning in eyes for first time in months. Not from sadness, from purpose. He'd left this for her, for family, knowing that someday, somehow, a Callahan would come back. And she had. Sun was setting when Vera finally looked up from documents. She'd spent hours going through everything, organizing it, beginning to understand scope of what her grandfather envisioned. It wasn't just about cleaning Quarry. It was about proving a concept, that industrial sites could be reclaimed, that nature's own filtration systems could be harnessed, that healing was possible, and plans were detailed enough to actually work. If she could follow them, if she had resources, if she could survive long enough to try, big ifs. Vera was repacking documents carefully when she heard a vehicle approaching. Not Silas's old pickup, which she'd learned to recognize. Something else. Something expensive sounding. Black SUV pulled up to Quarry's access road and stopped. Door opened and man stepped out. He was probably early 50s, dressed in clothes that cost more than Vera had earned in last year. Tailored jacket, expensive shoes that had no business on rough Quarry ground. He had the kind of face that had probably been handsome once, but hardened into something else. Sharp, calculating. He smiled as he approached. It didn't reach his eyes. You must be Vera Callahan. His voice was smooth, professional, voice of someone used to getting what they wanted. Who are you? Garrett Voss. I own Voss Development Corporation. We specialize in land reclamation and commercial development. He gestured at Quarry. I heard through county office that this property finally sold. I've been interested in acquiring it for quite some time. Vera stood slowly, putting herself between Voss and open chest. It's not for sale. Voss's smile widened slightly. I understand. You just bought it. But I'd like to make you an offer anyway. $15,000. Cash. Today. That's 50 times what you paid for it. $15,000. The number hung in air between them. More money than Vera had seen in her entire life. More than enough to get her back on feet. To start over somewhere. To stop living in rusted trailer next to poisoned water. Why do you want it? She asked. Development potential. With proper environmental remediation, this could be valuable commercial real estate. But remediation is expensive, risky. I have resources to handle it. You don't. The answer is no. Think about it, Voss said, tone still pleasant. This land is classified as environmental hazard. Any development requires extensive legal clearance, environmental impact studies, remediation plans approved by multiple agencies. That takes years and costs hundreds of thousands. I'm not planning to develop it. Then what are you planning to do? Vera met his gaze steadily. That's my business. Something in Voss's expression shifted. Pleasantness cooled by few degrees. Miss Callahan, I'm trying to help you. This land is worthless in current state. Worse than worthless. It's a liability. If there's any contamination, Any environmental damage, you as owner are legally responsible for cleanup. That could bankrupt you before you even start. I'm already bankrupt. Then you have nothing to lose by selling. I have everything to lose. Voss studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled business card from jacket and held it out. My offer stands. When you change your mind, call me. But don't wait too long. Opportunities have expiration dates. Vera didn't take card. Voss looked at it, then at her, then placed it carefully on nearby rock. I'll be in touch, he said. Then he walked back to SUV and drove away. Vera watched until vehicle disappeared down access road. Then she picked up business card and turned it over in fingers. Voss Development Corporation. Corporate offices in Philadelphia. A website. A phone number with too many digits to be local. This wasn't some small-time local developer. This was serious money. And serious money didn't make offers on toxic quarries unless there was a reason. She thought about letters, about Jonah's warnings, about people who'd been willing to kill to control this land. Voss. Name felt familiar. And then she remembered. One of letters had mentioned a name. Not Garrett, but maybe a father, predecessor. Vera went back to chest and started searching through documents again. It took 20 minutes, but she found it. Letter dated March 1974. Addressed to County Commissioner. Signed by someone named Harold Voss, representing Voss Industrial Holdings. In letter, Harold Voss expressed concern about environmental impact of Callahan Quarry operations and requested formal investigation. 2 weeks later, according to Jonah's journal, first accident had occurred. Connection hit Vera like physical blow. Garrett Voss, son of Harold Voss. Same family that destroyed her grandfather's work was now trying to buy land from her. 50 years later, same game, same tactics, different Callahan. Vera looked down at business card in hand. Then she tore it in half and let pieces fall into quarry water. She needed help. Someone who understood what she was dealing with. Someone who might actually believe her. Next morning, Vera drove to Silas Brennan's house. It was small cabin set back from main road surrounded by pine trees. Smoke rose from chimney. Rusted pickup sat in gravel driveway. Silas opened door before she could knock. He looked older in morning light. Tired. Like night hadn't been kind. Saw you pull up, he said. You look like you've got something to say. I need to show you something. Silas studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Come in. Cabin was sparse but clean. Wood stove provided heat. Small kitchen table held coffee cup and newspaper from 3 days ago. Everything was neat organized. Home of man who lived alone and liked it that way. Vera spread documents out on table. Blueprints, letters, Jonah's journal. Silas looked at them for a long time without touching anything. His face showed no expression, but eyes moved across pages with intense focus. Where did you find these? He asked finally. in a chest, at bottom of Quarry, chained to bedrock. Silas picked up one of letters, the one addressed to William Brennan. He read it slowly, lips moving slightly with words. When he finished, he set it down carefully. "William was my father," he said quietly. "He worked with Jonah. They were friends. He died in second accident. Machinery collapse. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Wasn't your fault." Silas looked at blueprints. "I knew they were working on something. My father wouldn't tell me what. Said it was better if I didn't know, in case something went wrong. He was trying to protect you." He was right to. Silas touched edge of one drawing. "After he died, after Quarry shut down my mother and I tried to get answers. Tried to find out what really happened. But every door closed. Every investigation stalled. We were told to let it go. That pushing would only bring more trouble. What did you do? We let it go." Silas's voice was heavy with old regret. "We survived. We moved on. And I've spent 50 years wondering if that was right choice." Vera pulled out letter from Harold Voss. "A man came to see me yesterday. Garrett Voss. He offered to buy land." Silas went very still. "Garrett Voss. You know him." "I know the name. His father, Harold, ran Voss Industrial Holdings back in '70s. They had operations all over Pennsylvania. Coal, timber, water rights." Silas looked up at Vera. "They were the ones pushing for Quarry to be shut down. My father suspected they wanted aquifer beneath. There's massive underground water source under this property, fed by natural springs filtered through limestone. Some of purest water in state. Jonah wrote about that in his plans. He was trying to prove Quarry could be used to access and distribute that water sustainably. And if he succeeded, it would have established legal precedent for public access to aquifer." Silas's expression hardened. Voss wanted exclusive rights. They were buying up land all around here, securing water access for industrial operations. But they couldn't get this parcel. Jonah wouldn't sell. So they destroyed him instead. They destroyed a lot of people. Silas looked back at documents. "What are you planning to do with these? Finish what he started." Silas shook his head slowly. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Voss Development is worth millions now. They have lawyers, political connections. They've been waiting 50 years for this land to become available again. You think they're just gonna let you?" "I don't care what they let me do," Vera interrupted. "This land is mine. These plans are mine. My family's work. And I'm going to see it through." Silas stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was small smile, sad, around edges, but genuine. "You sound like your grandfather. Is that a compliment?" "It's a warning." But smile didn't fade. "You're going to need help. Real help. Kind that knows how to fight back. Do you know anyone?" Silas thought for a moment. "Maybe. Let me make some calls." 3 days later, Vera met Dr. Bryn Hargrave. She arrived at Quarry in battered jeep that looked like it had seen combat in multiple geological surveys. She was 38 with dark hair pulled back in practical ponytail and clothes prioritizing function over fashion. She moved with confidence of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. She had sharp, steady eyes, the same eyes Vera had seen in William Brennan's photograph from Jonah's journal. Her grandfather's eyes. "Silas called me," Bryn said without preamble. "Said you found my grandfather's work." It took Vera a moment to adjust. Bryn was Silas's granddaughter, which made her William Brennan's granddaughter, which meant her family had also been destroyed by what happened here. "I did," Vera said. "Do you want to see?" They spread documents out in Vera's trailer. Bryn examined everything with focused intensity of professional scientist. She asked questions, made notes, pulled out tablet, and started running calculations. After an hour, she sat back. "This is extraordinary," she said. "Your grandfather was decades ahead of his time. Way he designed filtration system using natural geological processes instead of mechanical intervention. This could work. This could actually work. But it's going to be expensive and technically complex. And every regulatory agency in Pennsylvania is going to want to examine every aspect before allowing it to proceed." "How expensive?" Bryn hesitated. "Implementing full system, hundreds of thousands, maybe more." Vera's heart sank. She had exactly $43 left. "However," Bryn continued, "proving concept doesn't require full implementation. If we can demonstrate that natural filtration is already occurring, that water in deep chambers is as pure as these surveys suggest, that changes entire legal classification of site. How do we prove it? We need samples from deep chambers, analyzed by independent certified lab." Bryn looked at Quarry water, "which means someone needs to go down there and collect them properly." "I can do that. It's not just about diving down and scooping up water. We need samples from specific depths, specific locations, all documented with GPS coordinates and timestamps, and we need them to be legally defensible. Can you help me?" Bryn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My grandfather died trying to prove what was down there. My father, Silas, has lived 50 years with that loss. I became hydrogeologist because of what happened here. Because I wanted to understand water systems, to prove they could be protected." She looked at Vera directly. "Yes, I can help you. I will help you. But you need to understand what you're starting. Voss Development has deep pockets and long memories. If we prove this aquifer is clean, it undermines 50 years of environmental classifications. It opens questions about how those classifications were established. Who benefited? Who lied?" "Good," Vera said. "Let them ask those questions." Bryn smiled. It was smile of someone recognizing kindred spirit. "When do we start?" They started immediately. Bryn brought equipment that made Vera's scavenged diving gear look like children's toys. Professional depth monitors, water sampling containers designed to prevent contamination, GPS units that worked underwater, communications system so they could stay in contact during dives. "First rule," Bryn said as they suited up. "We work as team. You don't dive alone. I don't dive alone. We plan every descent. We stick to plan." "Agreed." "Second rule. If something goes wrong, we abort. No heroics. This water has been here 50 years. It can wait another day if we need to regroup." "Agreed." They dove together. Bryn moved through water with ease of someone who'd spent half her life underwater. She led Vera deeper than she'd gone before, past wreckage, past place where chest had been, to passage Vera hadn't seen, gap in limestone wall almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Bryn signaled. "This way." They swam through the passage. It was narrow at first, then opened up. Water temperature dropped noticeably, and clarity increased. Suddenly, they were in a chamber, natural, carved by millennia of water flow through limestone. Walls sparkled with mineral deposits, and water was crystal clear. Vera could see 50 feet in every direction, could see geological strata in walls, could see her own reflection on surface above. It was most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Bryn was already taking samples, careful, methodical, each container labeled and sealed, each location marked on GPS. They spent an hour in chamber collecting data, then surfaced together. Back on Quarry Rim, Bryn examined sample containers with satisfaction of someone who knew they'd found something important. "This is good water," she said. "Better than good. I'd stake my professional reputation on it." "Will that be enough?" "It's a start. But we need more. We need to show that filtration system Jonah designed is actually functioning. That contamination everyone talks about is surface level only. That deep system is intact." Over next 2 weeks, they worked systematically, diving, sampling, documenting. Bryn sent samples to 3 different certified labs. All came back with same results. Water in deep chambers was pure, drinkable, better quality than most municipal water supplies, exactly as Jonah's surveys predicted. Armed with this evidence, Vera started making plans. She contacted environmental agencies, began paperwork to have site reclassified, started researching what it would take to implement even basic version of Jonah's restoration plans. She also started blog, documenting everything: history, discovery, testing, truth about what really happened here. Within weeks, she had 300 followers. Within 2 weeks, 5,000. People were interested. Story of corrupt land seizure, of environmental fraud, of young woman fighting to restore her grandfather's legacy. It was good story. Inspiring story. And that's when Garrett Voss made his next move. Letter came from law firm in Philadelphia. Cease and desist. Claiming Vera's blog contained defamatory statements about Voss Development Corporation, demanding she remove all references to Voss family and issue public apology. If she refused, they would pursue legal action for damages. Estimated damages $200,000. Vera read letter 3 times, then showed it to Bryn. "They're trying to scare you," Bryn said. "It's working. They can't actually win defamation suit. Everything you've posted is either documented fact or clearly labeled opinion. But they can tie me up in court for years, and I can't afford lawyer for even 1 day." Bryn's expression tightened. "This is what they do. They use legal system as weapon. They know you can't fight back, so they don't have to prove anything. They just have to threaten." Second letter came week later. Not from lawyers this time. From County Environmental Office. Anonymous complaint had been filed. Allegations of illegal environmental disturbance, unauthorized excavation, improper disposal of hazardous materials. Inspector would be visiting site in 30 days. If violations were found, land could be seized under hazardous site emergency regulations. 30 days, Vera felt walls closing in. This was same playbook they'd used on Jonah. Legal pressure, environmental claims, anonymous complaints appearing from nowhere. "We need to move faster," Bryn said. "If we can present complete water analysis before inspections show we're conducting legitimate restoration research, it changes narrative. Can we do it in 30 days? We can try." They pushed harder. Longer dives, more samples. Bryn worked 18-hour days analyzing data and preparing reports. Vera documented everything building case that site was not hazardous but valuable. Silas helped however he could, making calls to old contacts, sharing what he remembered from 1974, lending equipment, providing moral support when exhaustion became overwhelming. But pressure kept mounting. On day 20, Vera found her trailer's door forced open. Nothing stolen, but everything searched. Documents scattered. Equipment moved. A clear message. "We can reach you anytime we want." On day 23, someone cut her vehicle's brake lines. She discovered it only because Silas happened to check before she drove into town. On day 27, real attack came. Vera woke to sound of engines, heavy equipment. She stumbled out of trailer to find truck at Quarry's edge. Men in hazmat suits, and chemicals being dumped directly into water. "Stop," she screamed, running toward them. "What are you doing?" One of men turned. His face was covered by respirator, but she could see his eyes. Cold. Professional. Just doing a job. Truck emptied its load. Thick, oily liquid that spread across Quarry's surface like disease. Then they left, just drove away, leaving Vera standing at water's edge, watching as everything they'd worked for was poisoned. She fell to her knees. It was over. They'd won. Just like they'd won 50 years ago. Bryn arrived 20 minutes later. She took one look at contaminated surface and went pale. "How bad?" Vera asked. Bryn was already pulling on gloves, taking samples of oily substance. "I don't know yet, but if this reaches deep chambers, if it gets into filtration system." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Silas arrived next. He stood at water's edge, staring at contamination. his hands clenched into fists. "They did this to your grandfather, too," he said quietly. "Near end, when he wouldn't give up, they dumped industrial waste in upper chambers, used it as proof site was too contaminated to salvage. What did he do? He tried to clean it, spent his last money on remediation equipment. But they'd already won. Damage was done. And legal costs bankrupted him before he could recover." Vera looked at poisoned water, at blog posts she'd written, at evidence she'd gathered. All meaningless now. She had 7 days until inspection. 7 days to either prove deep chambers were still clean or watch as land was seized just like it had been taken from Jonah. 7 days before Voss won again. That night, Vera sat alone in trailer surrounded by her grandfather's documents, blueprints, letters, journal that detailed every setback, every small victory, every moment of hope that ultimately led to defeat. She could give up, should give up. Rational part of brain screamed this was unwinnable. But there was another part that kept her going through 6 months of cascading failures, part that made her buy this land in first place, part that refused to disappear. She opened Jonah's journal to last entry, written day before he signed away land. "I tried. God knows I tried. But some fights can't be won by one person alone. If I had more time, more resources, more proof, maybe then. But maybe isn't enough. I'm writing this so whoever comes after, whoever finds what I'm leaving behind, will know truth. This land was worth fighting for. Water beneath is worth protecting. And people who destroyed this work did it not because they were right, but because they were ruthless. Don't let ruthlessness win. Not forever. Someday someone will come back. Someone who can't be broken, can't be bought, can't be scared away. And they'll finish this. I have to believe that. Even now, even at end, I have to believe land calls its own back. That truth eventually surfaces. That buried promises can still be kept. Vera closed journal and looked out at Quarry. Surface was dark with contamination. But beneath that darkness, somewhere deep in limestone chambers, pure water still waited. Still clean. Still pristine. Still proof that everything Jonah believed was possible. She just had to get to it. And to do that, she'd have to go deeper than ever before. Past chambers Bryn mapped. Into parts of aquifer system they hadn't reached yet. Parts that might still be untouched. It would be dangerous. Passages were narrow, unmapped. One wrong turn, and she could get lost in limestone labyrinth. Run out of air before finding way back. But it was only chance left. Vera stood and walked to equipment. Started checking tanks, lights, backup systems. She would dive at first light. One last time. As deep as she could go. And either she'd find proof that deep system was still clean, still functioning exactly as Jonah designed it, or she'd die trying. At this point, both options felt like victory, because one thing she wouldn't do was give up. One thing Voss couldn't take from her was her refusal to stop fighting. Some promises were worth keeping, even if keeping them cost everything, especially then. Part 3. Rebirth. Dawn came cold and colorless. Vera stood at Quarry's edge watching contamination spread across surface like oil slick, and felt weight of what she was about to attempt. 6 days until inspection. 6 days to find proof that deep chambers were still clean. 6 days to save everything. Bryn arrived as sun cleared tree line. She took one look at Vera's face and knew. You're going deeper. It wasn't a question. I have to. Passages beyond main chamber are unmapped, unstable. If you get turned around down there, I won't. Vera. Bryn's voice carried weight of professional responsibility. I can't let you do this alone. It's too dangerous. Then come with me. They stared at each other. Two women bound by grandfathers who'd tried and failed, by promises buried and dreams destroyed, by stubborn refusal to let ruthlessness be final word. All right, Bryn said finally, but we do this right. Full safety protocols, redundant air supplies, communication line between us. And if I say we abort, we abort. No arguments. Agreed. They spent 2 hours preparing, checking every piece of equipment twice, running through emergency procedures, mapping what little they knew of deeper passage systems from Jonah's incomplete surveys. Silas arrived as they geared up. He didn't say anything at first, just watched with expression of someone who'd seen this moment before. Different people, different decade, same impossible odds. My father went into those deep chambers once, he said finally, 2 weeks before he died. Came back saying he'd seen something extraordinary, something that proved everything Jonah believed. But he wouldn't say what. Said it was safer if knowledge stayed buried until right time. Did he tell you where? Bryn asked. He said to follow the flow. That water always knows the way. Vera and Bryn exchanged glances. It wasn't much, but it was something. If we're not back in 3 hours, Vera said, call emergency services. Silas nodded. His jaw was tight. 3 hours. Then they stepped off edge. Descent through contaminated water was like swimming through oil. Surface layer was thick, clinging, fouling masks. But 20 feet down they broke through into clearer water. Contamination hadn't reached depths yet. Not all the way. They swam toward the passage Bryn discovered. Through narrow gap. Into first chamber where they'd collected original samples. Water here was still crystalline. Still pure. Bryn's GPS showed their position. They were 60 feet down now. Passage continued deeper, angling away from main quarry basin. Follow the flow. Vera could feel it. Subtle current. Not strong but present. water moving through limestone drawn by underground channels toward some deeper system. She pointed. Bryn nodded. They swam into darkness. Passage narrowed. Walls of limestone pressed close on both sides. Vera's breathing sounded loud in own ears, amplified by regulator. Her light cut a cone through murky water, revealing stone carved by millennia. 70 feet. 80. Passage twisted. Turned. Descended at steeper angle. Vera's communication line crackled. Bryn's voice tinny but clear. Depth approaching recreational limits. We should consider turning back. 5 more minutes. Silence. Then, 5 minutes. That's it. 90 feet. 100. Pressure was immense now. Vera's ears ached despite equalizing. Her tank pressure was dropping into reserve zone. They'd need to turn back soon whether they found anything or not. Then passage opened up. Suddenly, they were in space so vast, Vera's light couldn't find far walls. Cathedral carved by water and time. Ceiling soared upward, lost in darkness. Floor dropped away into depths that made stomach clench, and water was absolutely impossibly clear. Bryn's light joined hers, sweeping across chamber. Mineral formations sparkled on every surface. Stalactites and stalagmites that had taken thousands of years to form. Natural columns of stone that looked carved by master sculptors. But it was water itself that took Vera's breath away. She could see through it like glass. Could see geological strata in walls. Could see formations 100 feet away with perfect clarity. This was it. Primary chamber. Heart of aquifer system. And it was untouched. Bryn was already pulling out sampling equipment, moving with focused intensity. This was what they'd come for. Proof that deep system remained pure, despite surface contamination. Vera swam slowly around chamber light, revealing details. Way water flowed. Inlet channels feeding fresh water from underground springs. Outlet channels distributing it through limestone network. Exactly as Jonah's blueprints showed. This wasn't just geological formation. It was a machine. Natural filtration system operating for millennia. Her grandfather had simply recognized it, tried to harness it, tried to prove nature's engineering could be protected and utilized without destroying it. Then Vera's light caught something that made her freeze. Metal. Rusted but still recognizable. Partially buried in silt at chamber's edge. She swam closer. It was equipment. Old equipment. Industrial grade. And it didn't belong to original quarry operation. She brushed silt away carefully. Metal came clear. Pumping equipment. Pipes. All bearing manufacturer stamps. She shone light on one of stamps and felt blood run cold. Voss Industrial Holdings, 1974. Bryn appeared beside her. Vera pointed at stamp. Even through mask, she could see Bryn's eyes widen. This equipment had been deliberately placed here, in deep chamber, before Quarry shut down. But why Vera examined pipes more carefully? They led to what looked like drilling apparatus. positioned directly over one of natural inlet channels. Understanding hit like physical blow. This was sabotage equipment. Voss hadn't just claimed Quarry was contaminated. They'd actively contaminated it, pumped industrial waste directly into filtration system, ensured that water tests would show toxicity, and then they'd buried evidence, left it here in chamber they assumed no one would ever reach. Bryn was frantically photographing everything: equipment, stamps, positioning, all time-stamped and GPS tagged. Legal evidence. Then she found something else. Metal box, sealed, attached to drilling apparatus. She pried it open carefully. Inside were documents, wrapped in waterproof plastic, somehow preserved despite 50 years underwater. Work orders, signed by Harold Voss himself. Detailed instructions for placement of contamination equipment. Dates, times, specific chemical compounds to be introduced. And a note, written in handwriting matching signature. Once this is complete, environmental tests will show exactly what we need them to show. Callahan will have no choice but to abandon property. Make sure this equipment is placed deep enough that it won't be discovered during surface remediation. By time anyone thinks to look this deep, if they ever do, statute of limitations will have long expired. We'll own water rights, and no one will ever question how we got them. Vera's hands shook as she held plastic-wrapped documents. This was it. Proof. Not just that Jonah had been sabotaged, but how, and by whom, and that it had been deliberate, premeditated, criminal. 50 years might have passed, but some crimes don't have expiration dates, especially when criminals are still profiting from them. Bryn's communication line crackled urgently. We need to surface, now. Tank pressure critical. Vera looked around chamber one more time, committing it to memory. Crystalline water, natural beauty, machine that nature built, and that her grandfather tried to protect. Then she carefully secured waterproof package in equipment bag and followed Bryn toward surface. They broke through contaminated layer, gasping. Fouled surface water seemed even more obscene now that Vera had seen what lay beneath. Like someone deliberately smeared filth across work of art, which was exactly what happened. Silas was waiting at edge. He reached down, helping pull them up. His face showed relief of someone who'd been counting every minute of 3-hour window. Did you find it? He asked. Vera pulled waterproof package from bag and held it up. We found everything. They spread documents across Vera's trailer floor. Work orders, installation instructions. Note from Harold Voss. All preserved by waterproof packaging that somehow survived 5 decades. This changes everything, Bryn said. Her voice shook slightly. This is direct evidence of environmental fraud, of deliberate contamination. Statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing fraud. And if Voss Development has been benefiting from water rights they obtain through criminal activity, those rights can be challenged. Will it hold up in court? Vera asked. I'm scientist, not lawyer. But I know evidence when I see it. And this is ironclad. Silas picked up one of work orders. His hands trembled as he read. My father knew. That's why they killed him. He must have found this equipment, understood what it meant. They couldn't let him talk. Silence that followed was heavy with 50 years of buried truth. What do we do now? Vera asked finally. We go public, Bryn said. We send this to every environmental agency, every news outlet, every regulatory body with jurisdiction. We make it impossible to bury this time. Voss will fight back. Let them. They can't fight facts. But Vera knew it wasn't that simple. Powerful people didn't give up power just because facts emerged. They fought. They obfuscated. They used money and connections and legal machinery to grind down anyone who challenged them. Just like they'd ground down Jonah. Unless. We need more than just us, Vera said slowly. We need people who can't be ignored, who have credibility, who've been watching for something like this. Who did you have in mind? Vera pulled out phone. Her blog now had over 50,000 followers, people who'd been following story, who'd invested emotionally in this fight, who wanted to see truth revealed. Everyone, she said. She started writing. Not blog posts this time. Call to action. Within hours, she'd posted everything. Photos of sabotage equipment, scans of work orders, full story of what they'd found and what it meant. She named Voss Development, named Harold Voss, named Garrett Voss. She laid out entire conspiracy. 50 years of fraud, of stolen water rights, of environmental crimes buried and forgotten. And she asked for help. Response was immediate. Comments flooded in. Shares multiplied. Within 3 hours, post had been viewed 200,000 times. Within 6 hours, news outlets were calling. By next morning, it had gone viral. Garrett Voss's response came swiftly. Not through lawyers this time. He came in person. Black SUV pulled up to Quarry with 3 other vehicles following. Expensive cars. Serious people. Voss emerged with entourage that screamed money and power. But his expression wasn't confident anymore. It was tight, controlled. Face of someone whose carefully constructed world was cracking. Miss Callahan, he said. His voice was level, but Vera could hear strain beneath. We need to talk. I'm done talking. You've made serious allegations, accusations that damage my family's reputation, my company's reputation. I've presented evidence. Evidence that's been underwater for 50 years. That could have been planted. That could be fabricated. Bryn stepped forward. I'm Dr. Bryn Hargrave, certified hydrogeologist. I collected that evidence personally. It's been photographed, GPS tagged, and chain of custody documented. 3 independent labs are analyzing samples right now. If you want to claim fabrication, you're going to need better arguments. Voss's jaw tightened. This property is still classified as environmental hazard. Inspection in 5 days will confirm that. And at that point, regardless of whatever conspiracy theories you're spreading, county will have grounds for seizure. Surface contamination that you dumped 3 days ago. Vera kept voice calm. We have that documented too. Time-stamped video from trail camera I installed after my trailer was searched. Shows your trucks, your people, your chemicals. For first time, Voss's control slipped, just for second. But it was enough. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. You don't understand forces you're challenging. My family has been part of this state's infrastructure for 3 generations. We have relationships, resources. We can make this very difficult for you. More difficult than living in my car. More difficult than watching my grandfather's work destroyed. More difficult than seeing my family's legacy buried for 50 years. Vera stepped closer. She was half his size, half his age, with fraction of his resources. But she met his eyes without flinching. You've already taken everything I had to lose. That makes me dangerous. Because people with nothing left don't back down. They fight. And they don't stop fighting until truth comes out. Voss stared at her. Then he turned and walked back to vehicle. But before he got in, he looked back. Inspection is in 5 days. We'll see what truth emerges then. Vehicles drove away, leaving Vera standing at Quarry's edge with Bryn and Silas. He's gonna make a move, Silas said. Something big. They're desperate now. Let them be desperate, Vera replied. We have 5 days. Let's make them count. They worked around clock. Bryn contacted every environmental expert she knew, sent evidence to federal agencies, submitted reports to EPA, documented everything in triplicate. Vera kept posting. Daily updates, videos of restoration work, interviews with Silas about what happened in 1974. Blog following grew to 100,000, then 200,000. Media requests poured in. Local news, state papers. National Environmental Magazine wanted to do feature. Story was getting too big to bury. On day 3, something unexpected happened. Man arrived at Quarry, elderly, probably in his 80s, moving slowly with cane. He identified himself as Robert Morrison, retired engineer. I worked for Voss Industrial in 70s, he said. I was part of team that installed that contamination equipment you found. Vera's heart skipped. Are you willing to testify to that? I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Morrison's voice was steady. I've carried this for 50 years. Watched Harold Voss get rich off stolen water rights. Watched his son inherit empire built on fraud. I told myself it was just business. Just following orders. But it was murder. Those men who died, they died because we sabotaged that quarry. He pulled out folder. Old. Yellowed. I kept copies of everything. Insurance, I told myself. But really, I think I knew someday this would matter. Someday, someone would need proof. Documents he provided filled in every gap. Internal memos. Financial records showing payments to county officials. Detailed plans for sabotage operation. Complete picture of conspiracy. Why now? Vera asked. Morrison looked at Quarry, at contaminated surface, at fence and warning signs. Because I read your blog. Read about what your grandfather tried to do, what my company destroyed. And I realized this was my last chance to make one thing right before I go. He handed her folder. Use it. Finish what Jonah started. Don't let them win. On day 4, federal investigation was announced. EPA was opening formal inquiry into Voss Development Corporation's water rights acquisition. Department of Justice was reviewing evidence of environmental fraud. Garrett Voss held press conference, denied everything, called allegations baseless, claimed political persecution. But his stock price was falling. Partners were distancing themselves. Empire built on stolen water was beginning to crack. And then Vera discovered something that changed everything. She was reviewing Jonah's documents again, looking for anything she might have missed when she found a map. Not of Quarry, of Pennsylvania. With 6 locations marked, 6 quarries, 6 abandoned sites, all classified as environmental hazards, all shut down in 70s, all owned at one time by people who'd later sold to Voss Industrial Holdings. Bryn pulled up property records, cross-referenced dates, built timeline. Pattern was unmistakable. Voss hadn't just destroyed Jonah's quarry. They'd done this 6 times, 6 different operations. 6 different families forced out. 6 different pieces of land sitting over valuable aquifers, all following same playbook. Sabotage, contamination, fraud. Systematic campaign to control water rights across state. This is massive, Bryn whispered. This isn't just about your grandfather. This is conspiracy that affected dozens of families, hundreds of people. Vera stared at map, at 6 red marks, each one representing buried promise, destroyed dream, family's legacy stolen. We need to contact them, she said. The families. Anyone who lost land to Voss. Anyone who's been living with this for 50 years. They started making calls, posting on forums, reaching out through Vera's blog. Responses came slowly at first, then faster. People who'd lost family land. Children of workers who'd died in mysterious accidents. Engineers who'd been forced to falsify environmental reports, all with pieces of story, all with evidence, all who'd been told to stay quiet and move on. By day 5 morning of inspection, they had it all. Network of fraud spanning 5 decades, documented, corroborated, undeniable, an alliance of families who'd lost everything, finally ready to fight back. Inspector arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. She was woman in her 40s, professional and thorough. She introduced herself as Elena Rodriguez from County Environmental Office. Vera had expected someone in Voss's pocket, someone predetermined to find violations and justify seizure. But Rodriguez's eyes were sharp and curious, not eyes of someone going through motions. I'll need to take water samples from multiple locations, she said. Test for contamination levels. Verify site classification. Of course, Vera said. But there's something you should see first. She brought Rodriguez to trailer, showed her everything. Documents from underwater chamber, Morrison's testimony, water analysis from deep system, pattern of fraud across multiple sites. Rodriguez listened without speaking, took notes, asked pointed questions. When Vera finished, Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "You understand this is beyond my jurisdiction," she said finally. "What you're describing is federal-level environmental crime." "I know, but federal investigation takes time, and I needed you to see truth before you make your assessment." Rodriguez looked at contaminated quarry surface, at deeper water samples showing pristine purity, at evidence of deliberate sabotage. "I'm going to need to take extensive samples," she said, "from multiple depths. This may take several days." "Take all time you need." Rodriguez worked for 3 days straight, diving with Bryn into deep chambers, collecting samples, documenting everything, running tests. On third day, she submitted her report. Finding Callahan Quarry deep water system showed no evidence of natural contamination. Surface contamination appeared recent and localized. Evidence suggested deliberate introduction of foreign materials inconsistent with historical quarry operations. Recommended reclassification. Active restoration site. Seizure was blocked. Next month moved like whirlwind. Federal investigators descended on Voss development. Subpoenas were issued. Records seized. Conspiracy unraveled thread by thread. Garrett Voss resigned, facing multiple indictments for fraud and environmental crimes. His father's legacy dismantled by same evidence Harold Voss tried to bury. 6 families whose land had been stolen filed class action lawsuit, seeking return of stolen property and damages, using evidence Vera uncovered as foundation of their case. And Vera began real work, implementing Jonah's restoration plans, step by step, starting with surface contamination, removing it carefully, methodically, revealing clean water beneath. Bryn became her partner in work, applying for grants, bringing in volunteers, teaching science of natural filtration to anyone wanting to learn. Silas supervised his years of experience guiding practical details, watching his father's dream and Jonah's dream finally taking shape. Transformation was slow, but it was real. Week by week, water cleared. Month by month, ecosystem responded. Plants began growing at edges. Fish appeared in shallows. Birds returned to drink from water that had been poisonous for 50 years. Life returning to places that had been dead. 8 months after Vera bought land for $300, Callahan's sanctuary opened to public, not as commercial venture, as educational center, living demonstration that damaged land could be healed. That industry and nature didn't have to be enemies. That with care and science and commitment, restoration was possible. Opening ceremony drew hundreds. Families from 6 other sites, environmental groups, scientists, students, media, and Silas Brennan, who cut ribbon with hands that shook slightly as he held scissors. 50 years, he said, voice carrying across crowd. 50 years these waters have been silent. 50 years truth has been buried. Today we remember what was stolen. We honor those who died trying to protect this place. And we celebrate what's been restored. He paused, looking at Vera. My father believed in what Jonah Callahan was trying to build. He died for that belief. For 50 years I thought that sacrifice was meaningless, that they'd lost and nothing could change that. His voice strengthened. I was wrong, because one young woman refused to accept that loss, refused to let past stay buried, refused to stop fighting even when every rational person told her to give up. He smiled. This sanctuary exists because Vera Callahan is as stubborn as her grandfather, as brave as my father, and as unwilling to let truth stay hidden as any person I've ever met. Applause was thunderous. Vera stood at water's edge, looking out at what had been created. Clear water reflecting blue sky. Platforms where visitors could see into deep chambers. Education center built from reclaimed quarry stone. Memorial listing names of everyone who'd fought for this place, including 2 names carved largest: Jonah Callahan, William Brennan. That evening, after crowds left, Vera sat alone at water's edge. Sunset painted surface gold and amber. Fish jumped, creating ripples that caught light. She thought about where she'd been year ago. Bankrupt, homeless, desperate, making decision everyone called insane. $327 for toxic pit. Worst investment anyone could imagine. Except it hadn't been investment. It had been return. Coming back to something that had been waiting. That had called her without her understanding why. Her phone buzzed. Email. From someone named Sarah Mitchell in Ohio. I read about what you did in Pennsylvania, about uncovering Voss conspiracy. I think same thing happened to my family. We lost Limestone Quarry in 1978. Similar circumstances, accidents, environmental claims, forced sale. I have some old documents my grandfather left. I don't know if they matter, but after reading your story, I thought maybe someone should look at them. Vera opened attachment, scanned first page, and saw another map, another quarry, another family's buried promise. She looked out at water, at everything they'd built, everything they'd restored. This was only first. Somewhere in Midwest, another quarry waited, another family's legacy buried, another truth that needed surfacing. And Vera realized something that made her smile. She'd thought she was finishing her grandfather's work, completing one man's vision, keeping one promise. But it was bigger than that. Buried promises weren't just about Callahan Quarry. They were everywhere, scattered across country, waiting for people stubborn enough to dig them up, brave enough to fight for them, willing to risk everything to make truth matter more than power. And she had map now, evidence, playbook. She knew how to find them, how to fight back, how to restore what had been stolen. One down, she whispered to sunset. 5 to go. Her phone buzzed again. Another email. Another family. Another quarry. Work was just beginning. But for first time in year, Vera felt something she'd almost forgotten. Something that had been buried as deep as her grandfather's chest. Hope. Not desperate hope of someone with no options, but solid hope of someone who'd fought and won. Who'd proven that individual people still mattered. That truth could still overcome money. That promises buried for 50 years could still be kept. She stood brushing quarry dust from jeans. Behind her, Callahan's sanctuary hummed with sound of flowing water. Clean water. Pure water. Water that had been waiting half-century to finally serve its purpose. Ahead of her, 5 more sites waited. 5 more fights. 5 more families who deserved to know truth. It would be hard. It would take years. It would cost everything she had. But she'd started with $327 and ended with this. Imagine what she could do with sanctuary network of allies and truth on her side. Sun dipped below horizon, painting water one last brilliant gold. Vera took breath of clean air, tasting limestone and pine and possibility. Then she walked back towards small cabin sanctuary board had built for director. Her home. Her place. She had emails to answer. Families to contact. Plans to make. Buried promises were waiting. And Vera Callahan was just getting started. In gathering darkness, quarry water shimmered with reflected stars. Clear enough now to see straight through to limestone bottom, to chambers where truth had hidden for 50 years, to future that had finally impossibly begun. Some things stay buried because people want them forgotten, but some things get buried because they're waiting for right person to come back. Waiting for land to call its own home. Waiting for promises to be kept. And once they're uncovered, once truth surfaces and light reaches depths, they don't go back down. They rise. They transform. They become something more than what was lost. They become proof that fighting matters. That stubborn hope can move mountains. That bound person with nothing left to lose can change everything. Callahan's sanctuary stood as testament to that truth. And somewhere in Ohio, another quarry was waiting to prove it again.